There are 1,000,000 ways to die. We just wanna talk about it. CodeHeads.
Wow, here we are on CodeHeads talking about the 1,000,000 ways to die and ways to
And we
save
just
people.
want to talk about it.
We do. We just want to talk about it because we know there's other resuscitation based nerds out there like us that are really interested in codes, compressions, CPR, and saving lives. Um, so I guess we should probably do an intro. And
Okay.
I'm Bridget Smith, one code head, a
I'm
nurse.
Michael Svoni, code head 2. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? You're a nurse.
That's okay. And you are a medic.
Yes, I'm a paramedic. So we've both encountered codes in different arenas, but ultimately it's the same procedure and it works for both of us.
Yeah, and we've worked together for years. So
We
you've kind of
have.
adapted to the in hospital, the ICA side
Mm,
of the world, going from the out of hospital, the OCA.
yes.
But yeah, so Mike and I see things from different perspectives, but at the same time, really ultimately nerd out and focus on resuscitation in general and ways to improve it.
Hmm.
So we think that one thing that was really kind of interesting as we're getting ready for the new guidelines to come out from the American Heart Association, ILCOR, all that good stuff, which will kind of change, hopefully make some big changes. Every couple of years they have these little guideline updates, but then every 5 years is when they really, try to make some big changes. And I'm hoping, in light of the last time they made very few changes because it was during the COVID and when COVID was kind of hitting the US, well, hitting the world really. So they didn't make many changes. And so I think that this one, I think we're wrought for a big change is the base there. And I think one of the things that I've seen on social media and out there, and that I hear with like different, cardiac resuscitation specialists that I talk to, and a lot of the um, emergency cardiac care providers I work with, is this whole focus on the 2 minutes of CPR, and if that's going to be changed in the guidelines. So, Mike, when's the last time you've taught people that we have to do 2 minutes of CPR before checking for a pulse or the need to
7 days ago. And I remember
Same.
when I first started at BIDMC, that's Beth Israel in Boston, the director of resuscitation science, I inquired upon him, and this is a direct quote, his direct quote. I said, all right, the 2 minutes, could you just sort of explain that, the science behind it? And he said to me, it's arbitrary. Um, that's how he defined it. And I think what he meant by that, there was really nothing to support why they chose 2 minutes at that time. And often a lot of those, physicians' treatment would be prior to the 2 minutes. They were going like every minute. They all did it a little differently. So that really struck me. And that's why this is so interesting, because it's like it's questioning why we're doing the 2 minutes, which I think is a really, really good question, because we just teach it as 2 minutes, switch compressors and or when fatigued, and keep going. And then we're going to do a pulse and rhythm check. But it's like, why aren't we doing it sooner? Why aren't we getting on any evolution or trend in the initial rhythm that we saw, and then treating the situation versus maybe those 2 minutes were established for our convenience, and convenience being a simple time to switch. Everything lines up nicely. So it works for
Right.
the provider, which is good. It keeps things organized, but does it really suit the patient in the best possible way? So that's pretty interesting right now to see that, to see this change, potential
Right. And
change.
yeah, and it's a really loaded kind of thing too, because you know, you just gave the whole ball of wax, but there's so many different nuances within that, because yes, 2 minutes is easy, and it's, for providers that, those of us nerds that are type A, like, ooh, every 2 minutes we have an intervention, right? A
Yeah.
primary or secondary. And then, but every 2 minutes we're assessing for a pulse or rhythm check. But then for when you're teaching lay people too, it's an easy thing for them to remember. And I think,
Mhm.
when the AHA changes their guidelines, so often it's it is because it's what we're going to train lay people. It's not always necessarily,
Right.
what's best for the providers. It's for like what regular people that are not providers can remember when they're doing CPR. Um, but at the same time, I feel like that's kind of gone with the wind because I really focus when I do training. I really focus on just doing CPR, and then I do tell them to follow the prompts by the AED, right? I
Right.
don't focus on giving breaths. It's just because it's
Yeah.
hard for them to do. It seems gross. No one wants to do mouth to mouth, like even pre-COVID. I would never. I mean, mouth to snout on an animal, sure, but like humans, ugh. Um, but so you're really focusing on like just being like, okay, every 2 minutes, and so that's what they focus on.
Yes.
Um, but Mike and I had been talking previously, and I was training a class, and it was like a bunch of athletes, right? College age athletes. And these guys were jacked, like they had huge guns. And they're like, oh, 2 minutes, that won't be hard. And I was saying, oh, you'll be so fatigued. And they're looking at me like, oh, you're this like skinny little,
Yeah.
lady. You don't have any muscles, which yes, I totally do. But I'm like, no, it's talking to the gun.
Guns here.
Then
Still
I'm
tired.
and they're looking at me like you're old and you don't have any muscles, but then they're doing it and they're sweating and they're like, oh my god, is it almost done? And I'm like, yeah, I told you, two
Yep.
minutes of high quality compressions is hard. Like if you're doing 2 minutes of compressions and you're like, oh, easy peasy, you are not doing it correctly.
Yes. Yes. Um, I love that you bring that point up because I really harp on that during class. And adrenaline, it distorts not only our
Yeah.
perception of time, but strength.
Yeah.
So you could be going 5 minutes and think you're fine, but on the advanced level, luckily we have something like end tidal, and end tidal doesn't lie. So we could see that decrease. So when they say, I'm all good, we could say, no, you're not. It's sort of an objective input. And also, what I always bring up in classes, and I stated this, but yeah, the HA says the ultimate time to switch compressors is every 2 minutes, comma, or when fatigued. And I say, follow that comma, because as you just said, if you're doing them right, I'm sorry, you're not going to be achieving that depth of 2 inches. You're not going to have that rate of 100 to 120 successfully throughout that duration. And let's keep in mind, we are working on mannequins. They are positively svelte, swimmer's physique. They are honestly, these male mannequins that we utilize are probably 5'8", 150.
Right.
And as we know, that's not, really realistic. And not just that, they're easy to compress versus a sternum. So
Right.
imagine the fatigue factor on a real human. So I get gassed on a mannequin. When we get gassed, just apply that to an actual
Human.
human being who,
Yeah.
as you know, they're cumbersome, large. It's just that to me is just, I'd love to be able to mimic that in a classroom setting. Obviously, we can't bring in people. I
Yeah.
mean, but
But even if you get a cachectic nana, it's still harder than our mannequins,
totally. Yeah. I mean, the mannequins just push down and it's great for training. I'm
and they
not,
give you spring back, and
yeah,
it's
it's like, oh, this is great,
like
But nonetheless, if someone that is fit as a fiddle is fatiguing within those 2 minutes, whether they know it or not, they are.
right.
Because luckily we could have other people watching them, or we could have end title, other sort of feedback. But that's a long time,
It is.
and so
And
I mean that's a big one. It's really a big one, and so it's really important. If you are fatigued, it's like we don't necessarily know it.
right.
We need others, we need metrics, and we need to switch because then we're doing a disservice to them because we know if we're doing perfect CPR the entire time, we're still only achieving 1/3 of our baseline cardiac output, which that's
Correct.
not so hot, right?
You're right.
It's already a poor prognosis. So we might as well optimize and try to have that third at all times. So I went on for a while, but I really, really believe in this.
No, but I no, I agree with you 100%. And in hospital and for like our pre-hospital providers, we do have the beauty of end tidal CO2, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
not every hospital, deploys that all the time. Not every I think actually almost every EMS does. I think it's part of the protocols, but
Yeah.
not every hospital utilizes it for whatever reason, because it's cheap and easy and whatever. I digress. We'll talk about that another time. But not everyone uses it, and especially like lay people, they're not using it. So
No.
it is true that as soon as you get fatigued, you should switch. And I think one of the biggest things there is making sure that we are limiting that pause between providers, because I think that was a
Ugh.
big thing with the AHA too. They really wanted to limit, in ILCOR and really everyone, limit the pauses between the compressors. And I think that in hospital we train to hover above the other person, right? So you're
Yeah.
hovering above whomever. So when they're like, okay, switch in 3, 2, 1, and then the person who's been hovering drops on the chest, and so it's pretty much seamless, right? But you can't do that with lay people. You can't run mock codes with lay people. And
No.
so they're just kind of going. So it's like, oh, okay. And then they take a moment. And this is zero judgment, but like they got to get in their body position and make sure their hands are in
Yeah.
the right
Yeah.
place. And
Yeah.
like, oh, am I in the right spot? And then they start compressing. It's like, and so I always try, I'm like, just go. Like, if you're not in the exact right spot, that's okay. Like, crappy compressions for lay people, for bystanders, are 100% better than nothing. Like,
Right. Right. Right.
absolutely. I'd rather have you do crappy compressions than nothing at all.
Hmm. And I mean, like you alluded to prior to the podcast, like the precipitous decline that you could actually see on a graph
Right.
of like what happens to perfusion just after a few seconds. Like here you are, you're establishing, say, 10 millimeters of mercury, not to get fancy on everyone.
Yeah.
And then boom, it dumps and we got to work our way back up. And that's just a couple seconds.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, like in a community CPR class, I do try to stress, be ready, don't miss a beat, pun intended,
Yeah.
between switching. But they're just really, this is a lot for them. They're focused on their compressions
For
and
sure.
the AED, and as they should,
Right. Right.
But we, I think, really have no excuse to miss beats. And
Absolutely.
I
Like,
get really edgy, like truly, like, the HA also states, this is one of their mantras, we never minimize interruptions of compressions to no more than 10 seconds. So time is relative and 10 seconds is unacceptable.
long time.
And what I'll do is I'll show the learners, like, look at that analog clock. So I think the analog clock is really illustrated. I'm doing my compressions. Let's wait. After 5 seconds, my foot's moving. I'm like, we got to,
After 3,
after 3. And you can really appreciate, because 10 seconds, right? I'll be there in 10 seconds. That's not a long time. 10 seconds, my hands are going to be off the chest. No. Like,
That's
wow,
forever.
you have just really harmed this person, truly, or at least you've lessened their chance for ROSC. And that's not okay. I mean, it's not okay at the advanced level, period.
Right.
We don't need to interrupt.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I think that
sometimes yes, but
any provider, sorry, I didn't mean to jump on you, but
mm-mm.
any provider who is either, even if you're, for the EMTs that are, that the EMTBs, right? They just have BLS. They don't necessarily have ACLS certification and can't do advanced. And for like nurses or PCT or, PCTs, unlicensed personnel that work in the hospital that have a BLS card, we need to be working to not just like, oh, I have my CPR card and I'm, doing it. Like, they need to be held accountable for that too. Like, when we're working in these
Yes.
fields where people's lives depend on us, we do need to ensure that we are, that we're not kind of putzing around. Like, I know there's
Yes.
so much that everyone has to do and has to be trained in every single day, at work. But this is one thing where we really, really can change lives. You can make it or break it. And, I think it's really important. In 2005, actually, Ben Abella did does a lot of cardiac resuscitation science research, and he did a big study that was in circulation, but that was looking at chest compression rates during CPR and looking at how they're really suboptimal, first of all, for in hospital. And so that's been worked on and looked at and changed. But he also did another study looking at rescuer fatigue. And then in 2010, Donna Edelson did a similar study, also looking at in-hospital cardiac arrest and looking at how quickly our providers are fatiguing, and they were getting some audio-visual feedback on that, so they could, correct. But it really, between both of their studies, it shows that like after basically between 60 and 90 seconds, we start to go down the tubes with our compressions. You only
Hmm.
have so much ATP in your muscles. I
Hmm.
don't, unless you're like, I don't know, getting some glucose and, popping some nerd gummies, like right before you're starting your compressions, like you're running a marathon, you just don't have the glucose and the ATP like in your muscle stores to give you that
Hmm.
strength to continue for 2 straight minutes of doing really hard compressions. And as you said, the adrenaline overrides our body. So we're not feeling fatigued. And that was the interesting thing in a lot of these studies is that people are like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm not fatigued, but you are. And just like you were saying, we show end tidal CO2 to be like, no, no, no. You don't feel fatigued, but you are because you're not going at the same depth. You may be hitting the rate, but you're not getting the
Right. Oh,
same
yeah, right.
depth. And
I
that's
mean,
important.
and like you said, when they fatigue and the compressions are compromised, that translates to your patient compromised. In other words, your lack of strength or consistency is affecting their perfusion, which is then minimizing. You don't have optimal compression, so we're doing them a disservice by not switching out.
Right. And
And sometimes you mentioned PCTs. I think that's awesome because everyone needs to be held accountable. Like if you work in a medical center, if you work on an ambulance, even if you're not the highest level of care, you need to know what to do stat because you might be the first one there and not bite your fingernails. And that's why we have all these classes to support people that are maybe more uncomfortable or not as exposed to these situations. But there can't be any excuse. There really can't. Everyone needs to be able to participate because, as we know, in the immediacy of the event, that's when it really counts. We
right.
could go into depth. If someone's shockable, they're not going to be shockable in 5 minutes, and so you just lost opportunity completely. You just totally negated any chance they have to come back. I mean, I'm going into depth,
Right.
but the point is,
I'll bring you out of the death hole.
and also, sometimes people, and we've seen this, you have a team based approach. I might recognize, say I'm new, I recognize, oh, his compressions are kind of going downhill, but I'm just going to not say anything because I don't want to, embarrass him and I don't want to like look like I know it all. But this is where team dynamics and tact come into play because we need to tactfully interrupt that person. We
Right.
really do. Like, I'm sorry, don't take this personally, but you're getting less than a third depth. You're going about 90, you know, let somebody else come in because that's why we have all this help.
And I think, and I think it's great when we're able to recognize and to say things too, because that goes along with, the AHA's guideline, right? 2 minutes or you're fatigued. And that doesn't mean that maybe you don't feel fatigued, but someone's saying you appear to be fatigued because you're doing
Yeah.
something suboptimally. And, you know, kind of to circle back, that there really hasn't been any research to test the 2-minute protocol ever. There has
Mhm.
been no randomized control trials.
Right.
There's been no research really looking at that and driving it in. Um, and it really came from the the 2005 ILCOR guidelines, to simplify training, and that was it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
It was to
Yeah.
simplify training for both rescuers, and then to make sure that we were able to get a solid chest compression fraction data, that we were able to pull a ratio for that. Um, so they decided to do this like fixed time ratio and make it just easier for everyone.
Mhm.
Um, but on the flip side, and that's on one hand, that's great because
Yes.
simplification is amazing. We all have a lot on our brains, and there's so many things to remember in the
And the
hospital.
algorithm is, when you see the algorithm broken down every 2 minutes for cardiac arrest, it is a nice looking algorithm and it is simple to follow. And it's beautiful because it aligns with the medication pushes. So everything kind of comes together.
Right. It's very
You have your
simpatico.
FE every 4, and so it's every other pulse. So I really like organization, but
Samesies.
like you're saying, at what expense?
Correct. And there's a time for organization and there's a time for like also should there be a different algorithm like for the whether it's 2 minutes of compressions, whether we, change that or can we eliminate the pulse checks
Yeah.
so in a non-shockable rhythm?
Yes.
Why are we stopping and dropping the cerebral perfusion pressure of our patients every 2 minutes in someone with asystole and or PEA if they are showing no signs of life, if we have end tidal CO2 and that's not jumping up, why? What does it
Good
matter?
question.
I guess there is an opportunity that it might change to a shockable rhythm, but I would say that it's not likely. I mean, it's
Not.
not. Maybe change the algorithm that's every 4 minutes or something that we're stopping to check it. Because I don't know.
Yeah, it's because it makes sense because this is now targeting the specific situation of the patient. Maybe when you're dealing with shockable versus non-shockable, you have two very, very different situations. And I think they should maybe have a unique application. So when perfusion is what we're focusing on with asystole or PEA and not the electrical conduction issue, it makes sense to stop more often with the shockable rhythm versus non-shockable, and yet we don't have that distinction in place. So
Right.
it is worth paying some mind.
There was a study, and I wish I had it on the top of my head, but that showed that 82% of refibrillation. So if someone's, in a shockable rhythm and then we defibrillate and then they, go back into that rhythm, it's known as a refibrillation. But 82% of those happen within the first minute post shock.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll shock them and be like, oh, great, we got them out of it, but they're not necessarily getting ROSC. They're going to go right back into it.
Yep. Yep.
So why are we
I think I
mandating
have
those
that.
2 minutes?
Yes.
It just kind of it's prolonging, the state of them being in a shockable rhythm again. Whereas maybe in a minute we can shock again, and then go from there. And I know there's, this can be a talk for a different time, the stacking shocks and all that stuff that we used to do in the old days and whatever, and that's highly debatable these days. But especially with technology with defibrillators really changing and enhancing, and so we don't have to have our hands off for it to analyze anymore. Like
Big
it used
deal.
to be that if you were even touching the foot, it could pick up your pulse and be like, "Ooh," and throw
Yep.
off your
Yep.
algorithm, right? But now,
Uh-huh.
they are so smart that it can tell the difference between my hands pumping out someone's chest and what I'm doing versus the underlying rhythm, which is mind-boggling. And there's some people that are just so smart that I can't even.
It can't be emphasized enough how incredible that is to remove the artifact that we present, which can distort the rhythm that the machine reads. And if it could read while I'm pushing on it, and like you said, I don't know how it can do that, but wow, isn't that interesting? We could be
Right?
detecting that, how is this rhythm changing within those 2 minutes? Because we wouldn't know otherwise because we're not doing a pulse and rhythm check. But this thing is doing that in real time, which definitely can influence how the practitioner will proceed in terms of, all right, let's shock them now. It's instead of give it a minute because we have to wait till 2. We wait for 2 minutes.
Right.
And so now this technology is sort of saying we have the we have the ability to think a little more. We have more insight available to us, which can really improve this patient's chances potentially. If I'm getting a shock in instead of waiting, like you just said, do we shock in a minute after the first one? Maybe so.
And
right?
It also, sorry to cut you off,
And
but
same with
also,
the PEA systole. We don't need to stop at 2, perhaps.
Yeah.
We just keep, they're still not shockable, so why stop?
Yeah, so keep on keeping on.
Yes.
And if they are in a shockable rhythm, it allows us really to cut out so much of that pre-shock pause, right?
Totally.
Because we don't even have to stop for that analysis. You know how we train people, because when Mike and I work together and we train people, we train like, okay, clear to do the analysis. And then when we know it's in a shockable rhythm and our defibs are charging, we go back on the chest and get in as many compressions as you can until it's
Yeah.
fully charged, because it feels like an eternity. Well, it's like, whoop,
Yeah.
and then and then clear again. And that's, that causes a
Tick,
little bit of
tick,
chaos,
tick.
and it confuses people. And it's like, unless they've been to a ton of codes and all this other stuff, they're just, they're getting like one push or two compression.
Totally.
So what's the point of even that? So now, with this new technology, we can continue the compressions and then just be like, okay, it's shockable, we're charged, let's go. Easy, done.
And I mean, if you want to go here, then you throw on automated compression devices where we're not stopping to shock.
Yeah, well, we'll
Is that
talk
for another
that'll
day?
be another, another code
I
head.
just got too excited. But also, no, to that point, though, to stay on topic. So the public access AEDs now, the ones that I'll utilize for, community CPR, heart saver classes, the amount of time your hands are off the chest between that analysis and
Oh,
shock. I mean, you want like 10 seconds. Ooh, 10
oh,
seconds would be great. I'm sitting there like, oh my God.
oh,
Like,
I was stomach drops in classes. I'm teaching
I
people. I'm like,
feel it. I have a like physical reaction. It's,
same.
and I say to them, I explain to them how it works and how you don't necessarily need to take your hands off, just to teach them a little more. But and I understand why the public access AD works like it does. We don't, that we want to be cautious. We don't want to stress
Right.
these people out, and that's okay. But we are losing a ton of
Oh, I
compressions.
know.
I think that could make all the difference in the world.
Oh, 100%. But
It's
at
that
least,
research is supported.
yeah. Oh, for sure. Yes.
Like
Yes.
it really isn't that confusing. Hands need
No,
to
it's
stay on
not.
the chest.
Correct. And then,
Never take
yeah.
them off
And
unless you
it'll
have to.
say, yes, because it doesn't even have to let them know when it's analyzing. All it needs to let them do, or notify them, is, okay, now you need to hop off so I can actually deliver the electricity. But
Right.
that's it. And then get
Right.
back on and start CPR. So I do think that that's something the, technology world has been listening to in med tech. And that's amazing. And that's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need. I feel like our technology has been so, even though it's really advanced, it's not compared to like so many other facets within healthcare,
It's a good
and
point.
so I think it is amazing. I think the other subset of amazingness would be if public access AEDs weren't quite as expensive or laborious
Yeah.
updates, or not updates, upkeep, I should say.
And a lot of them waste time also for, let's talk about following the shock. When they hit the shock button, like really, what is it? A shock. It's a pulse. You could go right back on the chest, right? But these machines will, you're following prompts as you should, but the delay between post shock and getting your hands back on the chest is also maddening.
Well,
I could get
again, because
16 in
people are
on my
switching,
trainer.
and if,
16.
and
Good ones.
and if people are switching again, they're like, okay, I've got to get in position. Okay, are my hands in the right spot? Is it on the chest? And I get it, but
Uh-huh.
I always emphasize it's not like this is chaos. You're going to be like in class. This is like ideal state, right?
Lovely.
What you're going to see and what you're going to do is like, you're going to think, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And that's okay. I'd rather have you try than not try. And
Right.
that's the thing for out of hospital. Like, jump on the chest and start doing something. People are like, what if they don't need CPR? They will let you know.
Yeah, they'll inform you.
And you get a gold star for being awesome and trying. Like, I
Yeah.
always tell my kids, like, you don't need to worry until it's time to worry. And it's, there's so many what ifs I feel like I get from lay people. And the same within the hospital too. It's like, we tend to create our own barriers by asking, and probably in EMS too, like, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? I don't know. We'll figure it out. But like, yeah, what if there isn't this 2-minute like focus anymore? Great. Then we just train the hell out of it and we make PSAs and we just like,
Mm-hmm.
I think people will be pretty stoked not to know that they don't have to do that 2-minute focus all the time.
And at the layperson level, it makes things easier because I'm telling them, or the AED is telling IM and the AED to take your hands off the chest twice, where now maybe you're taking it off once for the shock. where, because they don't quite understand pulse and rhythm checks. And I don't get,
No,
well,
then
obviously not pulse checks because on the basic level, we're not doing that.
yeah,
But I'm not explaining to them VFib and all of that.
right.
And they don't need to know it. And unless they want to, I'm happy to talk about it. But now they're only going to take their hands off when there's a shock. And that makes sense to them. It's like, all right, I'm delivering electricity
Right.
into this person. I don't want to touch them. That makes sense. So I'm going to keep my hands off. Where the rest of it, I don't know why my hands are off. It's analyzing things. But
And if they don't have an AED, the other reason that I think, like, when I'm teaching, I'm like, if you don't have an AED, you're just going to do compressions. And that's what I
simple.
teach them. I basically teach them hands only CPR, and I have them just jump on the chest and continue compressions. Like,
That's all they have to do.
that, correct. It's
That's
like,
great. They
yeah.
could focus on one thing and they could do it really well.
So I
You
guess
know,
maybe for lay people, like, the 2-minute thing is kind of even like throw it out the window. I guess they ask
it
in the
is.
test. They ask in the
Yeah, they
question,
do.
if you're doing like a BLS class, they ask for that heart saver in certain areas. You don't have to do the test. So I always opt
Oh,
not to
yeah,
do
my
it.
heart saver doesn't do the test for some reason, the
I
classes I
don't either
do.
because you can opt not to.
And you're right, the 2 minutes, they're only going to know about those 2 minutes because the AD is set for 2 minutes.
Yeah. But it doesn't
And
even, and we tell them,
we
right?
tell them,
Hey, we're
yeah.
gonna do compressions for 2 minutes.
But
But
it's funny, no one knows what 2 minutes is. No one would agree. Like someone will think, oh, it's been 5 minutes since our last check. No, it's been 30 seconds. Like there's, everyone sees time differently where the
correct.
AD will tell you. So when they ask me, how do I know it's been 2 minutes? I'm like, it's all good. This AD will communicate that to you. So really your primary focus is this, like, boom, don't think about anything else. Keep doing this, have someone ready to relieve you. That's all that matters. Like we don't need to fiddle around with other items. Obviously the AD is extremely important if it's available, but I always tell them if you leave with nothing else tonight, never take your hands off the chest unless you
Yep.
have to. I
Same.
keep it because it's simple, and that goes for any level of care. That's what's so interesting to me is from a community stand. You take someone that is, they're a gardener and they come in to take this class. If they practice enough, they have the same skill set as someone in the field, medical field, because we all do the same thing when something happens right away. We're all doing the
Correct.
same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not intubating the second there's a code.
Right.
I shouldn't.
I would
And
hope not.
so, yeah, but people do. But hands on the
No, I know.
chest and let's get that AD. And so it's the same thing. I think that empowers them actually.
And I agree with you. And I also feel like, just from healthcare providers and responders and code heads that are really obsessed with resuscitation, like everything we do, everything we teach, everything we think about, or is so focused on the research and what has been shown and proven. And there is research, but like some of the most fundamental things that we teach are not research based. And I think there needs to start having some more of the questioning attitude of like,
Yeah.
okay, why do we have to do it like this? Because I do think that guidelines are just guidelines.
Yes.
They are guiding care. It's not hard and fast. So, but it does get dicey because a lot of hospitals, like I know, where we work, all of our policies need to be based on some sort of a guideline from like our how we respond to cardiac arrest events and all sorts of different events, but we're focusing on cardiac arrest here. Is like it needs to be based on a guideline from a larger entity such as the AHA. So whilst it's just guiding care, there's also, if you belong to Get With The Guidelines, they're going to give you a gold star, a platinum star, or whatever, based on how much you adhere to their guideline. And hospitals love having that. We got platinum level for our cardiac arrest, and we got platinum level for stroke, and for whatever they get their gold stars from, platinum stars from the AHA. So while it's a guideline, and so we can deviate and do our
Yes.
own thing, we're going to get people kind of jumping down our throats and saying, oh nope, that's not what the guidelines are. But if the guidelines aren't based in research, and it's not based on anything other than ease of teaching and simplicity, I think we
Yeah.
need to question that, because there are some areas where simplicity is great for lay people, maybe for basic level providers, but there's other areas, especially for like the advanced level providers, where, you know, maybe let us give us some options that are actually based in research and let us kind of make our own thing, maybe, change every 1 minute, or when end tidal CO2 hits X. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe add something in that'll actually make providers and hospitals and pre-hospital, entities really get the things we need, like end tidal CO2, because that would make a change. That would
Yeah.
impact lives and survivability from these events. If we all had something that
Yes.
guided our care, rather than a number on a page and someone just watching us and saying, "Oh, I think you could do better," and that's great. Having someone coach is great, but again, you never know what perception is. So
And like again, you stated the key term to emphasize is guidelines.
yeah,
And there is like you said, there is so much space within those guidelines to get more specific,
right,
to home in on the specific issue at hand and target that versus all right, we advanced providers, we're supposed to be able to think and we're supposed to be able to react to the situation, which is constantly changing,
right.
you know, during the arrest. And there's a time then to deviate. And it's not necessarily a deviation because these are
So make your own
guidelines.
adventure. You know?
It's the fun part.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I should say this. You might want to edit it out. I'm not sure. But do you know who Scott Weingart does this MCRIT podcast? And he's an emergency physician. I believe it's Stony Brook. And I don't like the way he stated this, but I get his point. He said ACLS is for dermatologists. And what he's saying, I don't, it's crude, but he's saying what we're sort of talking about, where we have these guidelines, but really these advanced practitioners are in a position to interpret them how they will and apply their experience to you know to those guidelines, or in addition to those guidelines, like we're talking about shock every minute. Is it a shockable rhythm or non-shockable rhythm, which determines how much time we might want to have on the chest. So I love that. I love the thinking part of it. I love adding all these different metrics within those 2 minutes, like what's happening now, because it's not the same 2 minutes it was at the beginning. We're
Right.
6 minutes in. Why are we doing everything the same? It's not working, maybe. Or let's add this, let's try that, let's do this. Like it really is simplistic, but I do appreciate the guidelines. And I know a lot of people knock them, and I don't like that
Right.
because it is coming from very smart people's input. And
For sure.
but I think people get a little hot shot about, oh, it's AHA. It's like, well, they're guidelines. You don't have to marry them, okay?
Correct.
So
Correct.
like, you can discredit them all you want. That's up to you. But they are,
Yeah, but they are,
they're relevant, and
yeah. And I
and
think with the
they should be
technology,
respected.
I agree. They should be respected, and with the technology, but they should bring in the technology that we use. So it should be research
Yeah.
based, and if it's not, just be a little bit more transparent about that, and then also use the technology that is advancing in our favor to help increase survivability, and and include that in those guidelines. And this 2 minute CPR, I think, is exactly one of those things that you know we can do all the things that they want, all those tenets of high quality CPR, including limiting hands off time, and and getting the right rate and depth and all that good stuff, will be met if we pull in this technology, so that we can have that like insight CPR where
Mm.
it's analyzing while I'm doing compressions. And so
Insight CPR. I love that. Did you
yeah,
just make that up, or it's
no,
what they
no,
call it?
Not
I think I
TM.
love
Don't get
that.
already as TM'd. But I think, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna pause us really quickly. Well, I honestly think that, I'm looking forward to these new guidelines coming out in 2025 with a marriage of the technology, the research, and see where we can really drive home survivability from these sudden cardiac arrest events and keep it easy and simple. So, thank you guys for hanging out with us. Let's see what you guys think, what you guys are doing at your institution. Like, share, subscribe, keep us in mind. So for all of us code heads out there,
There are 1,000,000 ways to die. We just wanna talk about it. CodeHeads.